Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Good afternoon. Welcome to What Matters to Me and Why. I'm Vanessa Gomez-Brake, the Associate Dean of Religious Life. What Matters to Me and Why represents a creative solution to an important and often unrecognized problem in the university setting, the separation of intellectual life from personal and spiritual issues. This program offers the Trojan community the opportunity to hear from USC faculty and administrators in a different way. Rather than lecturing on their area of expertise or research, we invite speakers to share their life journey with us. This series has been happening here on campus for nearly 20 years. And so if you would like to nominate a member of the USC community to speak at a future event, please visit our website, orl.usc.edu. And additionally, if you're interested in seeing past speakers, we have a long history of videos on the website, so you can, if you miss an event, you can always go there and view them. Today, we will be hearing from Sally Pratt, the Vice Provost of Graduate Programs. But before I introduce Natalia, who will be introducing Sally, I want to take this opportunity to tell you about several events that the Office of Religious Life is sponsoring this month. For those of you who will be on campus tomorrow, we've partnered with Visions and Voices for a panel and solidarity workshop. It's entitled, When We Imprisoned Our Own, Lessons for Today from Japanese American Incarceration. Associate Dean Varun Soni will be moderating a panel which starts at 5 p.m. at Doheny Memorial Library. Additionally, on November 16th at 6:30, you can come visit the Caruso Catholic Center, where there will be two leaders in conversation, Richard Mao and Father James Heff, talking about evangelicals and Catholics yesterday and today. And they'll be in conversations on the differences and similarities between evangelicals and Catholics in cultural, political, and historical terms. Lastly, I want to invite you to the University Religious Center. On Tuesday, November 21st, we'll be having our fall burning ceremony there at the USC courtyard. It will be preceded by a drum circle, and the evening begins at 6:30 p.m. and will include s'mores, so please come out. So now, on to our main program. I'd like to introduce Dr. Natalia Dame. She is a Dornsife preceptor, postdoctoral teaching fellow at the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures. She received her Ph.D. from USC just last year, 2016. Her research interests include 19th century Russian literature and culture, gender, and second language acquisition. So let's all give a warm welcome to Natalia.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you here. I'm very grateful today for the opportunity to introduce my teacher, mentor, dissertation advisor, and colleague, Dr. Sally Pratt. Sally is the Vice Provost for Graduate Programs and the Professor of Slavic Languages and Literatures at USC. As one can imagine, juggling responsibilities between these two posts cannot be easy. However, Sally not only miraculously manages to wear two hats at the same time, but she also does it with such ease that it has given me and other graduate students proof that research, teaching, mentorship, and leadership do not necessarily mean four different people. Sally's ability and willingness to multitask in her dual appointment has also given me hope that one day I, too, will tackle all my professional responsibilities with a smile. By the way, a smile is Sally's signature feature. Coming into Sally's office as a graduate student full of anxiety, fears, and uncertainty, just one look at her warm, reassuring smile could get you going all the way from contemplating to drop out to celebrating your defense. Approachable, available, affectionate. This is Sally's trademark AAA feature that has saved many of her students on the windy road to graduation. Besides providing her students with inspiration on how to survive in an intellectually demanding academic environment, Sally's dual appointment also reveals her vision of the education process as a holistic and dialogical experience in which both students and their professors communicate and grow. Sally's combined administrative experience eclipses 20 years. As vice provost, Sally oversees the USC Graduate School, which has responsibility for all university Ph.D. programs and select master programs. Before that, she served as Dean of Academic Programs for the USC Dornsife College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, as President of the College Faculty Council and Academic Senate, and as Director of Faculty Development in the Humanities for the USC Dornsife. Sally's knowledge of the administrative mechanisms and the functioning of the university graduate programs enables her to provide a unique perspective to her students, myself included, in terms of job searching, grant applications, and ways to succeed in academia. At the same time, the fact that Sally is not only an administrator, but is also an insider to the academic world of teaching and research makes her expertise all the more valuable, precisely because it transcends boundaries. As the professor at the Slavic department, Sally teaches various courses in Russian poetry and the Pro Seminar for incoming graduate students. The Pro Seminar was where I first met Sally. I was immediately struck by the variety of readings, the depth of the discussions, and the hard-working yet relaxing and relaxed atmosphere of the class, something that Sally is known for among her students. Sally's sense of balance and intuitive understanding of the stick and carrot paradigm was one of the reasons why I chose her as my academic advisor. She knew when to push and when to let me sizzle. All of this accompanied with praise and support so necessary for all students, but especially for the ones at graduate school. Even though my dissertation was not in poetry, Sally was willing to supervise my research and help me navigate the precarious intersections of Slavic and gender studies with confidence. Sally's perception of advising is not limited just to the dissertation supervision, but extends to various matters, such as jobs, postdocs, interviews, and other facets of life. In fact, I loved our meetings about my dissertation precisely because they went beyond cut this chapter in half and where's your thesis suggestions. A good example of Sally's inclusive concept of mentorship was her willingness to meet with my parents and guide my husband throughout his graduate experience at the Rossier School of Education, something that reinforces my earlier idea of Sally being able to create a holistic, multifaceted educational experience for her students, where professional relationships are forged for life. I also suspect that one of the reasons for me even getting into the Slavic graduate program at USC was a poem that I wrote in my application, in which I paraphrased one of the famous Russian poets, Pushkin, who also happens to be among Sally's favorite and frequently taught poets. Sally once mentioned that she had found my take on Pushkin very interesting because it supported her early assumption that Russians do have an ear for poetry in general, and Pushkin in particular. Given that Sally's research and teaching interests lie in the fields of poetry and cultural relations, the product of which are her 3 books on Russian poets, Nikolai Zabolotsky, Tyutchev, Borotinsky, I may not be that off the mark, suggesting that Pushkin played a larger than expected role not only in my graduate career, but also in my relationship with Sally. Therefore, I find it most fitting to finish my introduction of Sally with a short poem that gives a glimpse of her mentorship and advisement skills. It takes a village to raise a Ph.D., were Sally's words to me on my first day. You've got to dot your I's and cross your T's, repeated Sally when my thesis went astray. Don't be a one-trick pony. Many times I've heard. The second field was added, then the third. Go get them. You can do it. What else do students need? And I was moved to write, present, and read. It's postdoc and Lolita. Please repeat. I thank you, Sally, for this pronunciation feat. Let's talk. What is your map? Where are you heading? And countless drafts later, my point was steady. How was your interview? Let's do the mock one now. My elevator speech is no longer huh, but wow. Here's a job announcement. What do you think? I always get Sally's reminders with a link. Let's contemplate some more. It is your choice. And this is how a mentor gives mentee her voice. Thank you. At this point, I would love to introduce my dissertation advisor and mentor, Sally Pratt.
think I don't even need to talk after that. I think that's what matters to me and why. You got it. So I want to start with thanks and then a warning. I want to thank Vanessa Gomez-Brake for wherever she went. I can't see through the lights. Keeping this series going, Varun Soni for starting it, and Natasha for the wonderful introduction, and really the members of the USC community, students, faculty, and staff, for giving me reasons to articulate what matters to me and why almost every day of my life. That is really a gift, and so I'm grateful for that. And now the warning. Most of what I will have to say is going to sound academic. And the reason is this: I have loved school ever since kindergarten. I think I was just born to teach and do research on Russian poetry and culture. This matters to me a lot, and strange as this may seem, though maybe less strange after this introduction, Russian poetry is one of the things that helps me as an administrator. I'm going to take a couple steps back to explain this link. And it begins with a personality test I had to take with 8th grade. This was a time in my life when I was good at English, I was good at history, I loved playing the flute in the orchestra, life was just fine. But for some reason, this test said, and this was supposed to be my path for the rest of my life, this test said, you should be an engineer. So I said, that's interesting. Oh, well, whatever. And I kept breathing and kept doing what I was doing. And I did not turn into an engineer. However, many years later, something clicked. I was Dean of Academic Programs in Dornsife College. I was sitting in my office in the 3rd floor of Bovard, and I was just learning to use Excel. And at that point, it was exotic, it was new, and it was complicated. So I was struggling to make sense of some data about Dornsife graduate programs. And all of a sudden, I said, oh my gosh, this is just like a poem. Well, not surprisingly, everybody in the dean's office thought I'd gone nuts. But in truth, I was just as nuts as I always was, but not more so. And the point is this: in a poem, if you change one word, one rhyme, or you shift one line to another place, the whole universe of the poem changes. The story of it, the mood, and every bit of the experience becomes different. Likewise, with a spreadsheet, you change one value, one element in that formula. You shift one thing to another place, and the whole universe of the spreadsheet changes. The story and the nuances of the story told by that data become different. So, for the poem and for the spreadsheet, it's the interaction between these different elements that counts. So once I figured out that poems and spreadsheets are alike, my life changed. I started to think about my approach to other things, the university, for example, and different academic fields, and people. The point is this: I like to know what makes things tick, how all the parts fit together or don't fit together, and how something works or doesn't work. This is probably why I liked algebra and chemistry in addition to languages and cultures, and why I applied to nursing school in addition to Ph.D. programs in Russian literature when I graduated from college. Some of the same impulses gave rise to the informal motto of the graduate school, which is rigorous, zingy, and user-friendly. Let me unpack this for you. Rigorous is pretty obvious. USC is an academic institution, and if our academic institutions don't do rigorous thinking, the world is in even bigger trouble than it seems to be. But more than that, we need to be ethically and morally rigorous. We must continuously take a stand for diversity, inclusion, access, and rigorously fair and humane treatment of every single member of our community. Zingy is admittedly an idiosyncratic word for a motto. It means not just innovative and cutting edge, but open-minded, open to all kinds of possibilities, both possibilities that are obvious and reasonable, and possibilities that are beyond reason. If we can't think beyond ourselves, beyond the constraints of our academic fields, beyond the constraints of society as we know it, how will we ever move forward? We won't. And finally, user-friendly. On a basic level, this means making sure that the software interfaces for Thesis Center and fellowship nominations are easy to use. But more than that, it means a humane and respectful relation to other people, relations with students, staff, and faculty, as we all work to shape a university that is equitable, strong, and supportive. The motto, rigorous, zingy, and user-friendly, also works for life in general, for relationships with other human beings, spouses, friends, children, Lyft and Uber drivers, transit police, red line passengers, you name it. You can tell how my life works. Parts of life demand rigor, moral and ethical principles, principles of family life, and principles of professional behavior. At the same time, where would we be without the zingy joy of a child who says, "Look, Mom, I'm wearing my underpants on my head"? Or without the zingy joy of a colleague who is not only a world-renowned scholar of Tolstoy's novel War and Peace, but the author, a total goofball, the author of ridiculous limericks that rhyme Comrade Stalin with Beyonce's Colin. Or the zingy joy of a trip to the Siberian city of Ulan-Ude to see the biggest sculpture of Lenin's head. Not his body, just his head, the biggest head of Lenin in the whole world. And finally, user-friendly. This often means simply taking the time to understand where another person is coming from. Sometimes it's obvious and not too hard. A friend on a stringent diet, or an adult child on a juice cleanse, God bless her, can be a total pill. But the one is still your dear friend and the other is still your dear child. Sometimes being user-friendly is harder. For example, during an encounter with a brusque tap card inspector in the 7th and Metro station, or an impatient and abusive person in a parking lot or on the street. Somehow, you need to recognize both yourself and the other person as human beings, both of you worthy of respect. It's not always easy to sort these things out, but awareness of the challenge is key. I'm going to finish up by quoting a tweet from the astrophysicist and director of the Hayden Planetarium, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who also likes to know what makes things tick. 2 months ago, on September 4th, 2017 to be exact, Tyson tweeted the following: "In school, rarely do we learn how data become facts, how facts become knowledge, and how knowledge becomes wisdom." If you unpack this tweet, it spells out the problem of epistemology. I told you I was a born academic. Epistemology, how we know, how we choose what we know, and how we know what we know. This matters to me as a university administrator, as a faculty member, and as a person. It matters a lot. The tweet implicitly describes the mission of the university as a whole: the sciences, social sciences, and humanities in all their manifestations. And it also describes the mission of a human being. We look at the world around us. We collect data. We sort it and aggregate it to make facts. We take the facts and subject them to rational analysis to get knowledge. We take knowledge and add values, faith, insight, and thinking beyond the limits of reason to get wisdom. This wisdom is our contribution to society and our contribution to ourselves as human beings. That's what matters to me and why. Thank you.
Questions, answers, thoughts.
Sure. Thank you. We'll now open up for questions and answers, and Sally will take them from down here, so you can go ahead and point out whoever wants to ask the first question. Thank you. I have a mic going around.
Sally, I have a very basic question. It says you're in charge of Ph.D. programs and selected master programs. What does that mean?
It's old stupid catalog language is what that means. The fact that, all right, this is more than you need to know. This is what I call academic TMI. Because of the way the administrative and financial structures of this university work, PhD programs are run through the graduate school. We technically grant those degrees, even though individual departments hound graduate students, and the faculty do the work to get the degree, or to help the student get to the degree. This is really a lot of information, but okay. So PhD tuition is centralized, and that's how we have fellowships. Master's and professional doctoral degrees are run directly through the different schools, through Price, through Rasier, through Viterbi, and those schools then own them in a certain way, and they get the tuition for them. The fact is, if something goes kerflooey in any graduate program across this university, minus dentistry, medicine, and law, but any of the academic degrees, it ends up in my lap in the graduate school. So that's a very long, complicated answer. The short one is, it's vestigial language in the catalog.
Thank you.
So when you decided to go against your aptitude test, your career test, was there a point in your academic career where you felt really secure in what you were studying, that despite those kinds of tests telling you otherwise, and I don't know if there were other people or anything as well, but where you're like, yes, I'm on track, this is what I want to do, and I belong here?
That's a really good question, and it's one that everybody in life probably struggles with in any kind of life at points, but certainly in academic life as well. The personality test just didn't make sense to me. I was just baffled. I thought, me, an engineer? Who are you kidding? And and especially women were almost never engineers in those days, so it made no sense, and I just thought, oh, whatever. When I went, I finally decided that I couldn't part with the Russian language, and so I didn't go to nursing school. I went into a PhD, and I thought into a master's program. I thought, well, I'll just stay another couple of years and I'll get a master's degree because I just think this stuff is really good. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll keep doing this. So it wasn't, it really wasn't a binary decision. It was just following my nose. And then lo and behold, I did write a dissertation, rather to my surprise. I said, oh, yeah, I did that. Oh, who would think? And then I applied for jobs. And I have to tell you then, when I came up for tenure, it was, your job when you're up for tenure is to be very nervous. Otherwise it's hubris. And I thought, okay, if I don't get tenure, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go be trained as a physician's assistant. And I meant it. It wasn't a joke to myself. It was serious. I think to my very good fortune, I did get, I think I would have liked being a physician's assistant actually too. But, I did get tenure and then started chugging along, with that kind of academic security. And as I've gone on further and further, the more I realize this really is what's in me. But it was, I worry, there's a lot of talk about how we train our PhD students. Why don't we train them to do every job under the sun that might remotely use any of their skills? And first of all, as a faculty member, I can train you pretty well in Russian stuff, but how do I know anything else? I don't. That would be, false of me to give other kinds of career advice. So we need to bring in other people to help with those things. I'm about to launch into a short lecture, and then I'll stop. But I am an academic, just so you know. So I don't want, one of my worries about that is that a lot of the talk is that we should force our students to decide early what kind of careers they want. And I believe that many people don't know what their careers are or should be. That following your nose, I think, is really important. And I will not force any of my students to say, do you want an academic career or a non-academic career? Because you just don't know what's out there until you yourself are out there. And the last part of this mini lecture is what I call the 3 R's of the PhD. And if you went through an American educational system, you probably heard of the 3 R's misspelled, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic. So the 3 R's of the PhD are risk-taking, rigor, and resilience. Risk-taking because who on earth wants to spend this long getting a degree? It's a risk. Most people have an easier, well, maybe not easier, but more straightforward path in their career. If you are going to make an original contribution to knowledge with your dissertation, that's a risk. It means nobody's done this before, and you are trying to figure it out. So that's a risk. Rigor, it better be rigorous, or you're not doing your job. Resilient, I know no one whose dissertation has just gone really smoothly from point A to point B to point C, wherever they landed. And certainly with Natasha, we had a lot of zigging and zagging, really big zigging and zagging at the beginning. And so you end up being resilient, or you don't do it. And I think, so people talk about transferable skills, and that's good, but it's even more than that. It's transferable qualities. Because if you've earned a PhD, you can stick to things, you can follow through a really complicated argument, and you can communicate that argument somehow. So it's not just, Russian, or polynomial something or a proteinase something or others. It's more than that. So that's a long answer to your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for being late.
No problem.
Technical is, it's classic. Google Maps. I live in Pershing Square, and put in ground zero. Of course, there's one over by a hospital. Then here, anyway, got here. Then the map you couldn't find. Anyway, classic. Like, I've been to Russia, I've been to China, I've been all over the Northern Hemisphere, thank God. So, you know, talking about the Trump thing, of course, I went to Senator Harris. I'm like, follow the money. Of course, they're not. But anyway, after being there, knowing you can take a $100 US bill out of the ATM in Moscow or St. Petersburg 10 years ago, I know how it works. And it takes understanding why technology, how it was developed. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, he wanted a date. Networking, he's 19. Guys, they want dates. I designed the Ambassador, a bar for 4 straight guys. They wanted phones in the booths, and they wanted Vegas Rat Pack. That's all they had. I gave them the Ambassador. It was written up in the New York Times that the place 007 would have a martini. They wanted my guest list because I knew the hottest chicks in San Francisco. I was gay. Anyway, my question to you, basically, I'm kind of making a statement, a guidance, is to get a good foundation in your education so that you can adapt and know what the core principles are, that why people are using technology the way they are. Same with Amazon. Books. Look at what he's doing with his money. Nothing. He's not helping create things. He's just helping other people sell things faster to more people. Look around you and see what's actually new, worthwhile, worth spending money on. Half the things I get on Amazon and I'm breaking fast. So anyway, my question to you with Russia is, while I was there, the people I met in Russia knew what was going on. They knew the mob-owned taxis, the black ones, and they knew what was corrupt. You knew when you were going to a mob-owned restaurant, you had metal detectors. People are smart. They knew what was going on. Here in the US, they don't. And Trump has really made that vividly clear to the entire world. And it's going to be really scary here. It's damage because we're now an open book. So I guess basically, I'm just wondering, I came here today because I love Russia, I love all of that, and I understand socially being suppressed with the czars, I understand the communism. I've been to China. China's very patient. In architecture, they didn't change the architecture for thousands of years. The only thing they changed was the ornament on the roof, depending whether the emperor liked a dog or a cat or whatever, a lion. That's the only thing changed for thousands of years. So basically, kind of my question to you is, how are students reacting to this? Because everything I see is they want it right now. They want everything quick and fast. I'm developing a custom high-end furniture because I'm anticipating I know what the developer is doing, and I'm going to anticipate the custom, and I have connections with very creative, good stuff. So I'm going to sell it, and they're going to be, wow! In 5-10 years, when their friend's stuff is falling to pieces, they'll be, oh, yeah. This is great. I'm going back to him. This is because I think long term.
Good.
And I have a good fine arts education at California College of the Arts before all this stuff. And anyway, but sorry for that long.
Okay.
I have a lot of information.
Okay, so I think that the situation with Russia is extremely interesting to those of us who've studied it or been involved in it in some way. It is not surprising, to be honest. I think we were terrifically naive several presidents ago when the Soviet Union collapsed and this sort of United States state apparatus thought, oh, well, they're not a military threat. They're going to be capitalists, and they'll all learn English, and they'll just be like everybody else. And that was really a terrible mistake. I mean, culture is a hugely strong force. But what gives me hope, I'm actually optimistic, is I teach not only graduate students, but undergraduates. And we have a course called Russian Thought and Civilization. It is a big general education course. We cover basically 1,000 years of Russian history in a semester. It's a bit of a scramble. But our students can come to grips with this. We teach complicated texts that are not they don't fit into the usual categories. They don't go from A to B to C to D. They go from A to Z to Q to R to D to E to something else, M and L. It's a long, complicated tradition, partly because in the West we have the Jesuit tradition and universities come out of the work of the Jesuits, which is very systematic and leads to, for the paradox is that in all that it's motivated very much by religion, it also gives rise to the scientific method. The Eastern Church is not run by the Jesuits, never was. And so the foundation, the civilizational foundation, is not as methodical. There are different ways of doing things. It's certainly not as linear in my experience in terms of documents and things. And so I see our students able to do that. They can say, this isn't, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is something else. It's really interesting. I'm a student. I have a brain. I can follow this. I can, pull some meaning out of this. And so for that reason, the world is very complicated and not always in ways one would want. But I do think when I see our own students, I'm actually very optimistic. So thank you for that question.
Sally, I would like to thank everybody for the questions and you for sharing your wisdom with us. And here, please accept this token of appreciation, a journal in which you can write more about things that matter and explain to us why. Thank you.